Welcome to the Gastro Girl Podcast. We bring together patients, experts, and health advocates who are all here to help you optimize your health. Here's your host, Jacqueline Garland.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Gastro Girl Podcast. Today I have a really special topic and an even more special guest. Joining me is clinical psychologist and friend Tara Cousineau, who is also the author of The Kindness Cure: How the Science of Compassion Can Heal Your Heart and Your World. Now, Tara is trained in mindful self-compassion and teaches a variety of practices of self-kindness, emotional courage, and resilience, something all of us need a lot of. I know I do. Welcome to the show, Tara. It's so nice to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jackie.
Well, you've done some amazing things. You know, Tara and I go way back over 10 years ago, probably more, when we first worked together at Revolution Health, and we've both started our own companies, and Tara's just really taken off with this area of kindfulness and mindfulness. And it's so authentic to who you are. And I've known you for a while, and we're so lucky to have you not only on the show, but also you've done an amazing course for GI On Demand Education University, which is on kindness and how the practice of mindfulness and kindfulness can really help your GI condition. So could you just explain a little bit of these terminologies, what mindfulness, kindfulness is, and how that relates to our GI condition and overall health?
Okay, well, a lot of people are familiar with mindfulness, which is really sort of a practice of being aware, of the moment as it's unfolding, without judging it. We can be mindful about our eating. We can be mindful about our exercise. We can be mindful about our conversations. There are meditative practices to cultivate mindfulness. And there's many varieties, focusing on your breath, focusing on nature, all sorts of things. And my term kindfulness is really the way that I sort of bridge sort of this gap sometimes that I see, is that we can be very focused and mindful, but not necessarily kind. So I just refer to kindfulness to remind us to bring in sort of our hearts into the process, to bring in some compassion and some self-compassion as we are trying to manage life, in some sort of intentional way. And we all know that life can be really hard, especially if you're managing a medical condition.
Yeah, and we've talked to so many patients and GI healthcare providers, and often patients feel fear when they're just diagnosed or living with a condition and maybe they're not in remission. They criticize themselves. They feel like they're out of control. A lot of patients have to restrict eating, and that could also trigger other things, being embarrassed. Maybe they're going out to dinner with a friend or family member, and they have to be really careful about what they eat, but they don't want people to think they are, have some eating disorder. So there's a lot of these feelings that all arise in patients. So how do you help patients incorporate mindfulness or kindfulness into small moments of their daily lives?
Well, you did mention, that people are really sort of self-critical about these situations. They have a shame around their illness, or having to actually always be aware of where a bathroom is, or having to be really picky about the food that they're eating, and they feel that other people will think something's wrong with them. And so one of the practices is really being kind to yourself about this situation, as opposed to judging yourself. Now, we can't help the sort of inner judge. We all have some sort of inner judge, and part of my work is learning how to befriend the inner critic, because that's just one part of us. It's one part of us that's being judgmental or is being shaming, and it's doing it in a way, sort of a misguided way of trying to protect you from really emotional or social humiliation in some way. We kind of go into our fight or flight mode. And when we go into this fight or flight reaction, we'll insert stories, and often that's that sort of inner critical voice. So, people with IBS or any of these sort of GI conditions, it's such a paradox, because you have to eat. Right? You have to eat to survive.
Yeah.
This is a part of you have to do this every single day. And can you manage this aspect of your life with a little more patience, a little more kindness, trying to silence the inner critic, not necessarily push it away? Because when we try to do that, if we try to kick the inner critic to the corner, we're actually just doing double damage. What we really want to do is to kind of turn towards that part of ourself with some understanding, like you would towards a child who's a picky eater, or towards
Yeah.
a child who's having a temper tantrum. If we can have this relationship with ourselves of being patient and understanding that this is hard, maybe we can approach our days a little bit differently.
No, that's so powerful, Tara. And you talk a lot about taking a self-compassion break. What does that mean and how can it help patients?
Well, so self-compassion has become a really popular concept in psychology. It's sort of coming out of the mindfulness movement. And it really is sort of based in some Eastern philosophies and Eastern traditions. But a psychologist in Texas, Cousineau, she's a research psychologist, has operationalized the term self-compassion. And basically, what she says is that there's three components of self-compassion. One component is mindfulness, is being aware of your feelings and thoughts as they arise without judging, without going to one extreme or the other. Another component is common humanity. We're not alone with our feelings. We're not alone with our suffering. Everyone suffers. Our situation might be unique to us, but it is part of the human condition. Can we understand that we are not alone? And then the third piece is self-kindness, which is treating yourself as you would a loved one or a friend in need, someone who is suffering. So a self-compassion break is kind of like, and you can do this literally within 60 seconds, is when a moment of distress arises. Say you're looking at a menu, say you're planning a holiday gathering with your family and you're freaking out about it. Is just you bring that situation to mind, and then you kind of go through these sort of three elements of self-compassion. Okay, this is causing me anxiety. This is causing me anxiety. Allow it to be there. Don't judge yourself. Just say, this is anxiety, right? And we name it.
Yeah.
And then the next piece is like, these social situations cause anxiety. I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. It's going to be okay. And you add in sort of this element of kindness, like, you've been challenged before and you've gotten through it. Be nice to yourself. You'll be able to get through it this time. So it's, in a way, it's this sort of self-guidance, self-coaching with, kind of keeping these elements in mind, which is not judging yourself, naming your feeling state, right? So many of us just avoid our feeling states. We don't want to sit with anger or frustration or uncertainty because it's hard. But if we can give it a little bit of airtime, we realize like, oh yeah, it's like a wave, it's going to pass. So it is a practice, not easy. And a lot of people have resistance to self-compassion, which I talk about in the course as well, is that, you start to be nice to yourself and you're like, oh no, I don't deserve this, or, I'm letting myself off the hook.
Wow. So when you talk about resilience, how does mindfulness help to cultivate resilience, or kindfulness help to cultivate this resilience?
Well, if you think about the word resilience, maybe some synonyms might be, flexibility, pliancy, right? Building resilience is really about being able to kind of weather life's storms with some ease, with some groundedness, right? We know that life is going to be hard. Every day can be hard. And resilience is being able to kind of just say, okay, this is a hard moment. Let me get my bearings. People sometimes define resilience as bouncing back to a previous state of well-being, or if you're traumatized or some unexpected thing has happened, sort of bouncing forward, like there's something that you can learn from this distressing situation, and so you're actually calling on strengths that you didn't even know that you had until you were faced with this adversity. And so in a way you're bouncing forward, you've learned something about yourself. So mindfulness, or being kind and self-compassionate, is really a kind of inner strength that allows you to really just weather those storms a little bit better. And we all have these strengths. They're innate to us. They're part of actually our hard wiring, but sometimes it just gets buried down. And so we just need to recognize, okay, this is a moment of difficulty. Let me accept that this is what's happening right now.
Well, these are great. So can you give us a few more tips or pointers that you would offer a patient or a caregiver who's, maybe they're just diagnosed with a condition, or they're struggling to get into a remission state where they're, trying to, work through some of their triggers or things that are causing flare-ups? Like, what tips would you offer to patients and caregivers?
Well, I would say to both audiences is that you need to understand that the person who's in distress is actually going to go right into a self-preservation mode. So our nervous system is actually what's going to respond first. And then our minds will insert some sort of evaluation or story, so that it is actually really important to help a patient understand is like these moments of distress are going to happen. Here are some ways that you can learn how to manage it. And usually it's going to be like a variety of coping skills. Like I usually say to clients, like we need a variety of coping skills, because it's not like one-stop shopping and say that mindfulness is going to work every time, or self-compassion is going to work. It might actually be getting out into nature, a change of scenery. It might be calling a friend. So we need to kind of know, what's in our toolbox. It's kind of a cliche, but it's actually useful.
No, it makes sense. Totally.
Yeah. And we need variety, because actually
100%.
if we have novelty, then then we know like, oh, this works in this situation, but this works in that situation. And so I would really just remind people is that our nervous system is going into some sort of reactivity. Can we start with the body first? Now, I know with people with GI symptoms, this could be a little bit of a tricky thing because they're so hyper-focused on their body.
Yes.
And so, they might actually be overthinking it. So I come from the perspective is like, just ask your nervous system, as if your nervous system is just a part of you. It's like, what is my body telling me it needs right now? Oh, I'm scared. Okay, what can help me when I'm scared? Maybe I need to write things down. Maybe these doctor's appointments, I need to actually record them so I'll remember them later, right? Or next time I really need to bring somebody with me, right?
Oh, good point.
Right. We process information differently.
Yes.
If we're too anxious, we might not even be able to take the recommendations from the doctor in the first place.
Great point, Tara. Great point. So you've done this awesome course on the GI On Demand University platform. Could you just give us a summary of what patients can expect, some of the highlights of your course? And again, it's a free course. It's on demand. You can take it at your leisure. Give us a little bit of insight into what you talk about there.
Well, I did talk about the self-compassion break. I define mindfulness and kindfulness, and we go into a little bit of what self-compassion is. But I always also spend some time on actually really understanding how our brain works, because we have this sort of function of our attention system, which is called the negativity bias. It doesn't mean that we're negative people or that we're pessimists, but basically what it means is that our attention is going to go to anything that we think is potentially dangerous. It's kind of like looking at the black dot on the white poster board. Like we don't see all the open space. We just see that one little flaw. Yeah. So the negativity bias is like that, and we all have it. Dr. Rick Hansen, who teaches a lot on this, will say, the brain is like Velcro for the negative, and it's like Teflon for the positive, because we don't actually allow the good things to stick. So we'll just go right to those sticky negative things. That's where our focus will dwell. We'll go into rumination. We'll get depressed. We'll get anxious. And so we really actually have to understand that that is our attention getting hijacked. And if we can notice that in the moment, so that's where mindfulness helps, and then redirect our attention to actually what has gone well. If you scan your day, you can ask yourself, what's gone well today? Or notice that, oh gosh, it's not raining outside. The flowers are blooming. Isn't this wonderful? Is that we need to practice attuning ourselves to the things that are happening, that are pleasant, that are joyful, that bring a smile to our face. And the thing I want to point out is that this is not sort of like toxic positivity. It's not about kind of like looking at the bright side. It's really more about letting you redirect your attention to the things that are beneficial, right? So maybe it's like, okay, you followed your diet today, you made that smoothie. That's a positive, right? Maybe it's, I don't know, with COVID over the last few years, just even people getting up and taking a shower, like that was a positive, right?
Going for a walk now that it's nice out, right? We go for a walk instead of...
So we just need to redirect our attention to the things that are beneficial, or prescribe for ourselves things that are beneficial, and put them into our calendars so that we really actually, we need to practice, we need to practice the things that are actually going to be good for us.
Yeah. And that's so important, especially in our culture right now. Everything seems so negative. Like it seems like everyone's focused on taking the other person down and finding the flaw instead of the good thing. So I think it's even more profound now to pay attention to what you're saying. because we're getting bombarded with negativity and scary thoughts and fear, like all the fear that's been instilled in us over the last 2 years as a country and as a world.
A lot of dangerous things happening. So of course our nervous system is going to be paying attention to it. We can't help it. It's like a really tricky part of our brain is that's where it's going to go. So we do have to take more pauses. We need to take some time out. So we have to really kind of rest our attention on things that are calming. So that often for a lot of people is seeing greenery, is nature, I don't know, taking a bath, doing some stretching, drawing, knitting, whatever it is that can kind of
dancing in your space by yourself.
So, dancing in your space is actually really important. I mean, one of the things that I've really gotten into over the pandemic has been sort of simple energy medicine exercises, just things that you can do that are like under a minute that can just actually, like in my mind, I'm like, okay, energy needs to move. If I'm sitting on my butt all day, in front of my computer, guess what?
Yeah, totally.
Total stagnation, brain
100.
fog, so we actually do need to move ourselves, every day a little bit.
Well, I love this. And we've got some great resources for you. Tara's done an amazing job, TaraCousineau.com. So many great resources, really awesome podcast as well, Tara, right? Where you focus on brief practices to grow this mind-body connection that you're talking about. And where can people reach that podcast?
Yeah, so that's wherever you, I guess, stream podcasts. So it's called Kind Minds. And there are 16 episodes. And I do teach about sort of presence and emotion regulation in those episodes. Yeah.
This is great. So check out the education course on GI On Demand. We'll have all the links for you. Check out Tara's website and her podcast. And I'm sure we'll have you on again. Maybe we could do a group meditation or something sometime. But definitely keep it positive and acknowledge where you're feeling, down, but don't let it keep you down. Right, Tara?
Right. So listen, it's just about emo diversity, so if we can actually hold, both the negative and the positive and let them blend, life probably won't seem as stressful. So I hope that people will take that sacred pause every day and be good to themselves.
I'm going to listen to this over and over again as I'm reminded of these things I need to do for myself as well. Well, and it's always great to see you, Tara. Thank you so much for this wonderful insight, and we'll hope to see you soon.
Happy to help.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gastro Girl podcast. For more information and resources, please visit gastrogirl.com. Do you have a question for Gastro Girl? Please email podcast@gastrogirl.com. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in the Gastro Girl podcast are not a substitute for medical advice from your healthcare professional. Please consult a licensed clinician in your state regarding all matters related to your health.